Hey, Scott, ROCKFILE, back with another podcast. This is going to be a discussion on what's wrong with radio and how it can get better. I'm coming up on my radio anniversary, and it's more years than I like to admit in a podcast. It's decades, folks. I have seen trends. I don't want to sound like the old radio guy, because to me, radio is still vital. It's still very interesting. It's still the thing I want to do every day. But I will tell you when radio started changing and how we got to today and what we need to do to fix it. A lot of people I hear from radio in other states, because I don't hear this a lot here, tired of the radio, play the same old songs, it's boring, it's canned, the disc jockeys aren't from here, blah, 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 blah. Give you a brief history of radio, how it works, and how this all got started. I'm mostly going to be talking about my personal experience in mostly rock radio. I have done other formats. This conversation can be applied to other formats. Any format that plays current music, you could basically use this. But all my examples will be rock, because that's the majority of my career. These days, I have 6 radio stations, AM, FM, 2 internet only, and a podcast. Rock is 3 of those things. So I always try and keep my hand in rock, and always have, because it's just what I love. It's personally what I like. And in radio, it doesn't really matter. You can be a great program director of any format. You don't have to love the music. But if you do, then that gives you a special, leg up on creating and crafting great radio stations in that particular genre. So musically, and I'm just talking about radio stations have to make money. We have salespeople, we have business offices, and that's a whole nother thing. Why I'm even having this conversation, 2 things happened Friday that reminded me of this, and it's been in my head all weekend, and like an artist, I got to get this stuff out. So Friday, I got 3 songs that are perfect fits for 2 of my rock stations. A new song from Marilyn Manson, a new song from Finger 11, and a new song from the Smashing Pumpkins. They all rock, they all fit rock stations, and I'm a rock radio program director. When I hear something that fits our format, that fits the station, and it's from an artist that everybody knows, I throw it on the air immediately. How radio normally works, and this is decades. The music director and the program director have a discussion every week of the new songs that are out that they should add to the radio station. They decide what songs have burned out, need to be moved out, and what songs need to come in. In pop music, you have, a variety of sounds, and rock music and country and urban. We get singles all the time, albums all the time. We have to listen and evaluate. That's always been part of the job. When you get into the bigger markets, they tend to have consultants. I started in college radio. We didn't really have a consultant. We had a few experts in town who would help out if we needed it, but we were kind of self-governing. But once I got into pop radio, my first radio station was a top 40 station in South Georgia. It was upgrading to 50,000 watts, and we had kind of a consultant, but not really. They couldn't really afford it. And so we had certain instructions to follow the pop charts, wait for things to be out for a week or 2 before we added them. That's what conservative stations do. You don't have to be the market leader in music in most cases over the decades. It's not been that important. In the 50s, perhaps, maybe in the 60s, and even to a certain extent in the 70s. But these days, things pop out on social media. Radio station tends to be behind. And that shouldn't be that way. And I don't think it should be that way. And that's part of why I'm having this discussion. So that was one thing that happened, is I got new music. And then I'm not waiting for a meeting with my music director or my consultant to put these songs on the radio. They fit the radio. They went in immediately. It wasn't even a question. The other thing that happened was, I get a lot of email about radio sales, quarterly earnings, announcements, AI laws, that kind of stuff. And Cumulus Broadcasting, a company I used to work for, said their second quarter was down due to challenging advertiser environment. I work in a market of 50 to 55,000 people on a peninsula in Alaska, and our radio station set a record in July on how much money, how many commercials we had on the air, and how much money we made. This is our tourist season, but this is also our biggest month in a long time. There was no challenging advertiser environment, but I'll tell you why we're successful when other radio stations are not being. Cumulus is one of the second or third largest broadcasting companies in the United States. It used to be Clear Channel and Cumulus when I worked for them. Cumulus still exists. Clear Channel became iHeartRadio. Now we have Odyssey and a few other companies that are big and growing. But these are big corporate entities, and I'll explain why they did what they did and how we got to where we are today. I'm getting there. So in the 90s, the FCC ruled that a company could own more than one radio station in a market, and that changed everything. At the most, you had an owner that usually owned a station or two, an AM and an FM. You know, my first real FM radio station was a top 40 station on the FM and kind of a standards AM station. That was reel-to-reel automation. It was the most amazing thing you've ever seen. Nothing like that exists these days, but it was ancient technology that was working. And I should do a whole podcast on that. I'm actually working on a book about radio stories and rock star stories and all that kind of stuff. So that's way down the road, but coming. So anyway, that's how radio worked in small, medium, and even to a certain extent, larger markets. New songs come in, music directors, program directors meet and discuss it. Every week, the radio station has an ad date. Monday or Tuesday is the day that certain formats, like Top 40 does on Mondays, Rock does on Tuesdays, whatever. Each format has a day, and it's either Monday or Tuesday. Then the charts come out later that day, and it used to be the charts came out on Friday, the Billboard charts and the R&R charts and things like that. And so you would get calls from record labels trying to get their songs on your radio station before ad day. This is why record company reps go to towns and take program directors out to dinner. They play songs for them in the car or in the conference room or in the hotel room or whatever, and they listen to the songs, and then they usually get an opinion from the program director or music director, and they can go back to their bosses and say, this many stations are going to add it, this many stations are thinking about it. And that's kind of how the business has always worked. I mean, even before my time, I was very happy when I became a program director. Important. I was the decision maker on songs. I started getting taken out in the backstage passes and the VIP treatment, and it was nice. But in the days of payola and stuff, because I was in radio and saw that stuff happen, we were very careful. You know, just because you took me out to dinner doesn't mean I'm going to add your record. Just because you gave me backstage passes to see Aerosmith last night doesn't mean I'm adding the new song this week. If it doesn't fit my radio station. Obviously, it was Aerosmith, and we were a rock station. We're probably going to play it. But they would talk to me about new up-and-coming bands, and I developed a relationship with all of these. And to this day, decades later, still have the relationship with all of these same reps because they know I'm honest with them. I'm not going to say, yeah, we'll play it, and then we don't. You know, that's a terrible thing because they go back to their bosses and say, this station's going to play this record, and then they don't. That looks bad because they're basically salespeople for these artists and these labels kind of thing. So how the industry has changed, once there were multiple stations and these consultants to some of these radio stations started becoming VPs of programming. That happened with Cumulus. Burkhart Douglas was one of the consulting firms we used at my rock station and my pop station that I ran in Montgomery, Alabama. And when Cumulus became a thing, when the Dickey brothers created Cumulus, they took most of the staff from Burkhart Douglas and made them VPs within the company. They were VPs of programming. I'm not going to mention their names. They're friends of mine. I don't have any bad things to say about them, but I was there in the beginnings of Cumulus and saw all this happen. So these consultants who were paid by the radio stations to help us be the best radio station that we could be. Consultants come into a market, they listen to the radio station, they listen to the competition, and they kind of create a report. And they say, this is where your weaknesses are. These are your strengths. Let's work on the weaknesses. Here's some ideas for maybe some specialty weekends or some programming changes, or maybe we adjust the music a little bit or whatever. They're true consultants in that way. And we paid them a monthly fee, and you would talk to them every week about music, that kind of thing, but still you were the decision maker. The program director was the guy who decided what music. They made recommendations, but in the end, the general manager and the programming department decided what was best for the radio station, whether the consultant did or not. Now, 9 times out of 10, you did what the consultant did because you're paying them and they're more experienced. And there were several times in my career I worked for big rock consultants, and I learned quite a bit from those people. And some of that I'm still applying today because some of what they used to do is now gone. When I started in radio at a top 40 station, we were concerned with making the hits, with breaking the hits, being the first one to play that on Friday night for the teenagers when they got out of high school and out of the football game on Friday night. We had the top 10 countdown and that kind of thing. It was all Debbie Gibson and Tiffany all day long at my radio station back in the 80s. And I remember the first time a consultant told me that, wait, stop. Stop talking about all this new music it hasn't even hit the charts yet. Casey Kasem's not talking about that because you don't have to break the hits. We just play the hits. Well, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way because as a guy who came from the music side of things, I was a trumpet player growing up and I can read music, and now I'm in radio and I'm picking the hits. I grew up on Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire and all these great songs, and I'm picking the new songs in the 80s that I think are, and wait, you're going to tell me I'm going to look at the charts for a couple weeks and then decide to play something? Well, that was the safe way to go. And to be perfectly honest, there are a lot of program directors and music directors then and now who aren't true music heads. Like, they're not all like me, and I totally respect that and understand that. You don't have to be. To be a good radio person, you need to be a good radio person. But some of us do it for the love of music, for the sheer love of that we get new music every week, that we're always getting something new. And I don't know, that's always what I wanted as a teenager. It's what I want as an adult in my 50s. So when the consultants became VPs, they used that mantra. I was on VP calls. I was lucky enough to be high enough within this company that when my consultant became a VP of programming, he would have a phone call with me before we would have the rock programming call with all the other rock program directors that were under him. We would discuss the songs that we thought were viable. He'd give his reasons, I'd give my reasons, and we'd get our stuff together. I was kind of the music director for Cumulus there for a little while. And then we would have the call and he'd say, well, I think we need to add this and add that. And I'm going, well, I'm glad I brought that song to him. I earned his respect early on because when he was just my consultant and I wanted to put this song, no, this was VP time. He was the VP of programming. We were putting together the active rock station and there was a Jane's Addiction song I wanted to play. And he goes, that was never a single. So I brought in the CD single from Warner Brothers Records and said he was a single. And that earned a little bit of kudos that, at some point, somebody's going to, in your industry is going to show you that you don't know everything. And that was my moment to shine. I'm fully aware that even today, I don't know everything, but it's a learning experience, right? So this mantra of we don't break the hits, we play the hits, and we wait for a couple of weeks to add new music has now permeated our radio culture. Even in the largest markets, they're not jumping on the new music unless there's a promotional deal involved. Now, sure, satellite radio does. They're playing things. Some of those formats are playing things they shouldn't play. Trying to experiment, maybe going by Spotify. And I've done a whole podcast on why Spotify doesn't have anything to do with radio, but that's a whole other thing. So the idea that these radio stations didn't need to be leaders anymore, and they didn't have to have program directors who were leaders anymore. Matter of fact, the staffs at most of these corporate radio stations are minimal. Radio station I started in a particular market 30 years ago is still there and pretty much has one live body. The morning show is satellite. I think the midday person is satellite. Afternoons, probably voice tracked, but he does it. And then there's a night show on. I don't think it's live and local either. One person at the radio station, a station that used to be fully manned. We had a morning show. We had a midday person, afternoon person, night person, overnight people, weekend people, sales people, you name it. Most radio stations are now part of a cluster where they are minimally staffed. Now, on the flip side, I work in a quote unquote small market in Alaska. We are minimally staffed, but we all wear so many hats. And we're all very good at it. We couldn't do it if any one of us weren't able to flip on a dime and do something else. The stations are fully staffed to a certain extent. We have air staff on all of the talking stations. We have a pop station that doesn't have any jocks on it. That's why I kind of dance around that. But we have jocks on all of our major day parts. It's all local. We don't have anything piped in except for some sports and some national talk shows. But like the rock station, the pop station, the greatest hit station, and the country station, other than some weekend shows, it's all right here from Alaska. All the jocks are here. All the voices are here. All the stuff we talk about is here. You don't have that in most American markets anymore. The radio stations in your market are programmed somewhere else. They're programmed by a VP or a programming staff somewhere. Yeah. I was in Miami and I was hearing midday people from other markets. I don't understand why in Miami they can't afford to find a really great midday jock for whatever station I was listening to. And they had to pipe something in by satellite and national contest and whatever. And back then they told us, well, this makes for better radio because our midday jock that we put on 25 different stations around the country is better than your midday jock. Well, I'm sorry, but the talent might be better. They might craft better, more engaging breaks. But the local guy or girl in my town giving it their best is more engaging to listen to because, well, the people of this market run into them at Walmart and Safeway. They're real people. They talk about the things here. They talk about going to see Salmon Fest over the weekend that just happened here in Alaska, where thousands of people go watch reggae and hippie music and dance in weird outfits, and it's a wonderful time. Those same people are going to be at our grocery stores, our gas stations, or whatever, and we're going to run into them. We're real. We're live and local. I came here to do radio because it's how we used to do it. We would take calls from people, run public service announcements, go interview people at a new business, highlight a new business. Here, most people listen to the radio like they did in my stations in Grand Cayman and Key Largo because they want to find out what's going on. In major markets around the country, people don't listen to the radio for that anymore. I don't know what they listen to the radio for, but here's my point. Everybody still has a car. Most people have a car. Radio wins. As long as radios are still in cars, I don't care what your Spotify subscription is or Pandora or any of the other services you use, Apple Music, iTunes, you name it. Radio is free and it's in the car. So it's up to radio stations to make compelling content. And I hate calling things content, but what else do you call the stuff between the music? A great radio station is more than just music. And I'm not talking about talk radio stations. That's not my forte. Again, most of my relatability here is to rock radio. So we have a station here in Alaska that plays current rock music along with classic rock music. Sure, we could go full nostalgic, full classic rock, and still probably make just about as much money, if not more. It would be easy to listen to. Nobody would turn it away. Nobody would complain. It would be fine. But you know what? You can get that on 1,000 different internet radio stations if you want something boring. My jocks come up with weird things to say because we're all kind of weird Alaskans up here. The rock station is fun to listen to. Our voice guy, he might live in LA, but he was born and raised in Alaska. So when I send him stuff for our promos and liners and IDs and stuff, I say, would you Alaska-ize this for me? Let's go pet a moose. 1069 The Fuse. You know, he does things that no other voice guy would do because, well, he grew up in Anchorage. He knows what it's like here. The flavor of the radio station is all of it. What music we choose, what the jocks say, and what we have the voice guy say in between. To craft a radio station that's listenable, that's personable, that you become familiar with, that you want to listen to all the time, is the great goal of all radio people. And most radio guys in most radio markets are saddled with no budget, no staff, can't do anything, so they pipe in satellite-fed music or a satellite whatever. And that's boring. Nobody wants that. And now these corporations who have cut their staffs down to nothing are not making any money. Cumulus were down for second quarter again because of advertising. Well, you know why? Because we are about 98% local advertising here. In most markets, you get a lot of national advertising. Coke will buy so many radio stations in a market. They'll buy the top 4, 18 to 34 markets and that kind of thing. We don't get a lot of that here. So my salespeople have to go create relationships with all the businesses on this peninsula. We are 98% local advertising dollars. That's why we're not affected by national trends. We're not affected by, well, this is Alaska. We're not affected by much that happens down there in the lower 48, to be perfectly honest with you. And I know we're an isolated case and an isolated market, but we're also, for me, who've been here, this week I'm celebrating 3 years here. I've kind of had this petri dish. I have people who live here who aren't going anywhere. They kind of live in this bowl. Let's see what they like. I've hosted the summer concert series for a couple years now. I talk to people when I go into stores. I make conversation about music, about radio, about whatever. But when they see my jacket or my car or whatever, they usually get around to the radio at some point. And people listen to the radio here. That's why I moved here. It's an amazing thing. But you know what? They could listen to the radio in your town too if the radio stations would just stop spending money on stuff you don't need to, like social media advertising and stuff like that, or a social media person. Have your jocks just post some pictures in the studio every once in a while. We introduced promotion directors. It's funny, when I first got into radio, salespeople didn't talk to programming and vice versa. We wanted less commercials on the radio. They wanted less music, that kind of thing. But these days it's different because we know, the programming staff knows that without the sales staff, the lights don't stay on and the transmitters don't stay powered. We need them. They need us to have a compelling product to go out there and sell. So the promotions director were invented in the 90s. They were the go-between between those two. They would come up with promotions. And I got to tell you, I've met some incredible promotions director who did amazing work, who raised the bar, not only for ratings, but for revenue for the radio stations, who did special events and stuff. They were good at it. But it became a thing to have a promotions director, and sometimes you can't find a good one. And then you get somebody just taking up a salary that you could be paying a jock doing something. We got rid of overnight people who were some of our creative types, because of automation, and you could save some money there. I don't begrudge that because honestly, traditionally, most people don't listen to the radio between midnight and 6 a.m. But other than that, you should have live people in the radio station. Whether you're voice tracking or whatever, your content should be local. This satellite stuff, I know it's a money-saving thing, and I know radio stations do it. And part of compelling music content is having something new. I am not going to wait 2 weeks if the Smashing Pumpkins finally put out a kick-ass rock song that I can play all day long. And why? Why am I going to step out there? Because, well, A, I know what a good rock song is. B, I've been that rock fan. Who knows if the YouTube video's up or the song came out today and my radio station's not playing it. Why are they not playing it yet? It's a rock song. It's from one of my favorite bands. It's from one of the bands they play. Why is the station not playing it? Well, we haven't added it to our rotation yet. It's what we used to tell people on the phone. I don't tell people that anymore. 3 songs came in Friday. All 3 were good enough to be on the radio immediately. They went on the radio immediately, and I'll report them on Tuesday, which is my ad day for rock radio. And this weekend, people are hearing, oh my goodness, we do a 2-hour new rock show on Sunday nights on the rock station. 2 hours I host. It's nothing but new songs that have come out in the last 6 months. Maybe a little longer than that, depending on how many songs I get. Anyway, it's, to me, easy to do real radio. Just do it. Stop. I'm in a small and medium market group on Facebook where I see people all the time are posting. There was a guy this morning looking for a morning show on barter. That means they want a satellite canned morning show to run in their market that they don't have to pay for. They will run commercials for. There are a lot of those out there. They will cut liners and promos to make it sound local. They talk to the radio pretty much to sound local, but you'll notice they never mention the town they're in. They never mention the traffic they got into that morning. They'll never mention the home team that won the game last night because they're not in your market. I'm not begrudging those people the money they make or that's not a service that's not viable. I've had many stations that had satellite morning shows, satellite afternoon shows. I've done it. I get it. Our talk radio station has a couple of those. But I feel, especially in a market like this, or Key Largo or Grand Cayman, these isolated markets where people need information. We don't have really local TV stations here. Everybody has, the internet, but cable, local stations for us are in Anchorage, and although that's 65 miles north, it's 3 hours north because, well, it's hard to get there through the mountain pass. It's hard to get TV and radio signals from there down to here, and that's why we exist. The linchpin of our stations is a news talk station that was made in the 60s. It was the first radio station here at all. We have pictures up. It's pretty cool. And since then, we've been locally sourced. We have a competitor. He's got translators all over the state. He pipes in his programming. He has someone else do it. He doesn't have anything to do with it. He's not a music lover. He just wants to be everywhere. That's not radio to me. Not that you have to be a music lover, but you have to be entertaining and informative. You have to give the city of license what they need. And for us, we have a variety of music, sports, and news formats that pretty much give all the information and entertainment that a radio station can provide to a community. We do a lot of stuff in the community. The community calendar is always updated. We have a lot of local talk shows with local people on it, local business owners, local artists, local craftsmen. All of our commercials are local for the most part. We have just a smidgen of that national advertising. It's a very live and local experience, and that's what radio needs to get back to. And it needs to get back to taking chances. Hire a program director who has a vision for the radio station and let him execute the vision. I had a owner one time hire me, made a deal with him. I'd get a raise after a year if I did this, this, and this, and I did all those things, and I never got that raise, and I left, but at least he let me program. I had a VP over me. We had a consultant, but both of them gave me enough latitude to still do what I do. And if I had gotten a new song from one of these bands back then, I would have put it on the radio back then, and it's what I do now. But there are a lot of program directors who don't. There's a lot of radio stations who don't. And you probably don't listen to the radio anymore because you don't care about it anymore. They're not live and local. They're not talking about the things you run into every day. They're not the people you run into in the grocery store, and I think that's the problem with radio. Hire some people that want to do radio, and I know it's probably hard in your local market to find people who actually want to do this for what the stations pay. I've never made a gazillion dollars, but I've loved every day of my life. I've had fun and felt like I'm giving something back to the community every day of my life. I spend my days at work crafting the radio stations and the content that we put out to make sure that my market has a great listening experience, entertainment, information, everything they need. It's real easy to do, people. And so many people, it's a bean counter thing, and it's a money thing, and it's radio is artistic, and radio needs to be artistic. You need to have those visionaries who go, you know what, a great song is a great song, and it fits my radio station. We're going to play it right now. We're not going to wait 2 weeks to see what other stations and other markets are doing with it. I miss one every once in a while. Sometimes we play a song that's just okay. But honestly, if I don't think it's a great song, I'm not putting it on. And I would say I'm over 95%. It's not hard to pick radio songs in the first place, as long as it doesn't make people tune out kind of thing. And that's one of the rules of radio is don't give people reasons to turn away. They may not come back. So anyway, that's a little bit of radio, and I babbled way too long. It just bothers me when radio pins a low second quarter on challenging advertiser environment. No, you have crafted that environment by having no staff on your radio station, no compelling content for people to listen to, and advertisers don't want to be on it. We have people begging to be on our radio stations. They're great to listen to. Check them out at radiokenai.com, will you? I'm Scott. I'm ROCKFILE. I had to rant about this because I just, it's not rocket science to do real radio. A lot of people try to do it on the cheap, and it costs money. You got to have some talented people, and you got to let them be creative. So check out our radio stations if you want to hear something creative, and find the ones in your market, and maybe share this podcast with them. Anyway, thank you for taking time out of your day. Have a spectacular day.